Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Comics Evolve, where we discuss all things around comics media culture with your hosts, Andy, Jarian, and Alex.
Welcome to Comics Evolve, myself, Jarian Gibson.
And I'm Alex Stroud.
And we are live talking about Agatha All Along, episodes 5 and 6. But before we get to that, how you doing today, Alex?
Pretty good. Been a long week. I'm so ready for this weekend. It feels like it was Friday like 2 days ago. So, it just feels like this week has gone on forever. So, what about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Last Friday evening, we went and saw Piece by Piece, which was pretty cool. So it was Pharrell's story, and they use Legos to tell that story. So it's pretty cool. It was Lego style animation, and
that's cool.
After watching it and how his brain works, his imagination, his creativity, I don't think they could have told it another way. Mm-hmm. And the messaging from the story was pretty cool as well, and the kids really enjoyed it. A lot of good music in there too. Like there were some artists early on that I did not know he worked with.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very cool. I watched a couple of the new episodes of American Horror Stories, which are like the little one-shot scary episodes that they do. And they had one, and it sort of reminded me a bit of WandaVision. So I thought that was kind of funny since, we'll obviously be talking about Agatha and everything. But yeah, I feel like there's maybe just some tropes that you can't get away from. I feel like they make it in a lot of different shows and stuff on TV. So
I'm just sharing the post real quick that we're live since the page is still the page.
One thing I will say that I thought was really interesting is, do you know what the back rooms are? The old internet thing about balloons that never end and stuff. They did the very first episode, and the new episodes coming back for American Horror Stories was about the back rooms, and I thought it was pretty interesting. So, yeah.
This background noise, you can't hear it, and luckily my noise cancellation is working, but I can hear it, and it's like driving me insane right now. Anything else going on?
No, I did watch WandaVision all the way through, again, so that was nice. I've got to get my partner caught up on Agatha All Along, but she had to watch WandaVision before we watched, Agatha All Along, so we watched all that, and then I got her through episode 3 on Agatha All Along, but it's pretty interesting seeing, we'll talk about it more, but, there's been a few questions that I've mentioned in some of our group chats about where is this character and why have they not made an appearance and this doesn't make any sense. Well, it's pretty interesting as we go in, and we'll talk about episode 5 and 6 today. So,
yeah. Have you anything else you noticed? We were watching WandaVision at all?
Yeah. So I will say this: when I was rewatching WandaVision, I kind of questioned going into this show why Agatha had all of her power basically gone. And one thing that I will say that I noticed was the fact that I didn't really realize that Wanda kind of absorbed all of her power in that final fight that they had, where you kind of always talk about how Wanda's always seeming to go through some sort of trauma and get more powerful, and I think part of that why she got so much more powerful was because she absorbed Agatha's magic. So yeah, I think that was pretty interesting. Obviously, just seeing characters like Mrs. Hart or Dottie, love that line, "The devil's in the details, Bev." Still feel like that was kind of like a little bit of a teaser of Mephisto. Maybe we'll see it at some point, especially with the witches stuff, right? It feels like we'll probably have some sort of a connection there. But I'm trying to think. There was maybe one big thing that I think really stuck out, and I can't remember it at this time. But if it comes back to me, I'll throw it out there. So.
All right, so starting in episode 5, it looks like the Salem 7 are looking for Agatha, whispering, find her, find them. And I think it was a fox, a crow, and a snake, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean the Salem 7 all have those different animals. There's like a crow, I think there's an owl, I think there's a snake, there's a fox, there's like a maybe like a wolf too. There's one that's like the bugs. It's like I forget what those things. They're like grubs and stuff, where they come out of her mouth and
Yeah.
everything. So yeah, I will just go ahead and say one of the things I do find the most interesting is for the longest time in Agatha all along, like in the beginning, we saw that rabbit, and that rabbit goes all the way back to WandaVision. Thought Nicholas
Senior
Scratch,
Scratchy.
yeah, might be Nicholas Scratch. So like, the fact that these Salem 7, who are the children of other witches that Agatha has killed, are showing up with animal characteristics makes me wonder if there's some sort of connection to us maybe potentially believing that rabbit might be Nicholas Scratch, because it seems like there's a big theme that's going on in this show, and a lot of that theme I think goes with the fact of like the children with the witches. Wanda's basically doing some terrible stuff trying to get her children back. It seems like Agatha basically gave up like her son to get some sort of power or do something to progress herself, because she's like, so I mean, they're kind of like foils of one another in a way, I would think. But even with like Billy now being involved, I think like it's kind of that idea where you would think for Agatha, it almost seemed like in the beginning it was a little bit of a redemption for her. It almost seemed like, maybe this was kind of like her trying to do a little bit right because she had done wrong by her son. But, obviously from the trajectory of the most recent episode, I think that's going to change a little bit. So, but yeah, the comparison on the animals, I think, is a very interesting thing kind of just going forward. So,
and then we get, is it Lilia? Or I keep saying her name wrong, and I always mess it up. Is it Lilia or Lila?
I think it's Lilia.
Lilia, okay. I keep going back and forth. My brain just thinks like it's Lila for some reason. But so she wakes up, gets them on the move. We see them on brooms flying. And it looks like the talk about the Salem 7, the children, like you said, are after them from Agatha's coven. And then it's funny they keep calling him Teen right now, because we finally figure out the next episode about his name and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they tried like a hex beacon or something like that on them, and it's like, they all hate the brooms because of women's domestic things and that kind of stuff, and because they're basic. And so they go through the next trial and they find themselves dressed in the 80s stuff, which is pretty cool. It'd be kind of cool to see how they go through different time periods and things, kind of like with WandaVision with the different TV shows and dress and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you get that like 80s kind of like sleepover vibe. It makes me feel like kind of like Camp Crystal Lake, kind of like in a way, like it feels like it's like in a cabin, or which season is it? I guess it's season 9 of American Horror Story. I did think it was pretty cool. Billy looks like he's, wearing an outfit that's quite similar to like how his costume would appear in a way.
It was just like Billy's costume in WandaVision, the Halloween episode.
Yeah, exactly. It was like very similar to that. And obviously Agatha's wearing purple and everything like that. So it seems like obviously that their costumes will kind of change with the Witch's Road. We learned that earlier in the earlier episodes, but it starts with him basically finding a Ouija board, right? And the Ouija board is basically another thing that Billy has found. I keep referring to him as Billy. That's because we learn his name is William Kaplan in the next episode. But another thing to start the trial has been found by him ultimately. And I did think that scene where Agatha basically impersonates Mrs. Hart and pretends to be her was kind of funny.
It wasn't because the spirit takes over Agatha. Miss Hart's spirit goes into Agatha and takes her over, and so that's why she's kind of talking like that too. And it looks like also too they have some 80s nostalgia there. Roseanne, Troll Dolls, as a fanny pack, the game Sweet Valley High, the Westview pendant. So all those things too are there in the 80s style house.
But didn't they say that was just her pretending because she was nervous or something like that? When they claim that it's Mrs. Hart that's possessing her, because like I believe
she's scared or something like
Yeah,
that,
because
or okay.
and then like I think after that is when it says like death is here, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, well, yeah, because like obviously there is somebody there that we think that might be responsible for that that response. But yeah, and obviously this moves into a trial where it's like, you know, basically an Agatha trial. It seems like it. This one is more pointed towards her because every trial is kind of moved towards it being more towards a certain witch
Yep.
on this. And I feel like this one is probably more of her trial. I could
Yep.
be wrong on that, but
And it's funny too. She has that one scene where she looks like the person out of The Ring. You know, as they come out. Was it the TV? Was it? You know,
yeah,
that type of creature. And then they talk about that Agatha almost attacks them, almost killing Jennifer Kale. And so that's interesting too as well. And then we see the ghost of Agatha's mother, Evanora Harkness. And so that's interesting also.
yeah, and I mean, like, I think this goes back to, you know, they've been having some kind of like flashbacks to Agatha's early life.
Yep.
And, you know, I think one of the things here is, you know, they're obviously trying to show that Agatha is almost like the villain of this show. It's her show, but she's almost like the villain. And it feels like she's going to end up being the bad guy in this. I don't really think she's going to end up having like a huge redemption arc, but I mean, you know, her mother's basically saying things like, oh, you know, you were born evil. I should have killed you in the beginning, you know, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and it just seems like, you know, we see that one scene where Agatha claims that she could be good and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately, you know, even the witches that are on the witches road with her are leery of her and are like, you know, she'll kill us and take our power when
she kind of does in this scene here too, because when her mom possesses her and then they try to go on without her, Rio refuses to leave her behind. And then Agatha steals Alice's powers. Then we hear Nicholas scratches a voice about Mama stop, but at that point Alice is dead. And so we lose another witch now, so we're down to basically 3 witches now.
Yeah, and I mean, what's weird is I will say this, like that scene kind of reminded me a little bit of when Wanda hears Billy calling out to her and says like mom, like, and except for his is like a cry for help, where like that one seems like she did something to him because like he's like saying mama stop. Like, you know, so it makes you almost believe that she did something to him. And, you know, there's been that rumor throughout the show that she like got rid of him for the dark hold and stuff. And I don't really think that makes sense. I think that's just one of those things where it's like, what's the worst thing you can do? Oh, she gave her son away for the dark hold kind of type of thing. But you know, who knows? Maybe she made a deal with Mephisto. Maybe she gave him up for something, like for power, like maybe it was for more power. Maybe she made a deal with death itself for him, you know, maybe to give her immortal life or something like that. You know, like there could be tons of different things that happen there. So I think that at the end of this episode, obviously when she takes the power of Alice, that witch, I don't think that she gets the power like she really thinks. Like it almost seems like she tries to use a little bit of it and it kind of like flickers out a little bit. So it almost makes me believe that it's like, obviously she's on the road to try and get full power, but her like quick way of trying to take it from other people are not going to benefit her right now, at least not until the end of this show. But yeah, I mean, we see that witch die, which is terrible. I feel like we might see her return at some point in the future, because I'm not 100% sure that everybody who dies on the witch's road is actually gone.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like even if it's in some like undead version that they might come back. But a lot of these shots, like the possession and stuff, they look great. I like the demonic kind of stuff, you know, things crawling all around, the body kind of contorting. Reminds me a little bit of that scene from Multiverse of Madness where Wanda climbs out of the mirror and is like all contorted, you know. That is so creepy.
At the Sanctum?
Yeah, like when he traps her in the mirror.
Not the Sanctum, at the
at what is it?
Comatage. Yes,
Comatage.
Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, so like, you know, when she comes crawling out of the mirrorverse and he's like, oh, that ought to slow her down, and then she just like bulldozes her way out. That's what it kind of feels like to me. So I think like from like a Halloween perspective in this, I think they definitely got like the feeling right. I didn't realize until I rewatched WandaVision that show I think came out around Halloween a few years back. So kind of the same vein here. So I think kind of going into this episode, I was not as excited as I was after watching the 6th episode. I won't jump to the 6th episode just yet, but like the ending, I think in episode 5 was what I was the most shocked about, right? Like, and that's obviously because, we basically get the hint that the teen is a big character, and it seems like he's quite upset, and he has a little bit of an outburst of power and makes it displayed. So
yeah, it almost seems like there's a lot of foreshadowing in this episode about who the teen is, who Rio is, and they're continually to put those out there in front of us. Like basically, it's out there right in the open in front of us, like hiding in plain sight. I would say.
Yep. And I think going into episode 6, one of the things that you're kind of like left questioning are a lot of the questions that we've had since the very beginning, like what is the deal with the sigil? Like why is he being hid? Like, what is the purpose of that?
Yep.
What is the purpose of the teen going on the Witch's Road and stuff like that? All things that we talked about and questioned in our chats and everything. And if other people would return. And man, going into that 6th episode, I feel like I had like 5 questions that after watching that episode, it was just like going down the list.
Yep.
Just check.
Yep.
And I was just like, okay, all right. Like I felt very well fed. Like that 6th episode was, I think, one of the best episodes of this season of the show. But I think it was because I was very shocked that I would say this, but I think like them going into the origin and the explanation of William Kaplan, I think was something that was very beneficial, because did they need to take the whole episode? I don't really think so, but I'm not really complaining, because like I thought like them kind of explaining like how he got there and showing the like foil of like what he was seeing when he first met Agatha when she was underneath that spell was very funny, right? Like there was some very great moments there. But yeah, go ahead. And,
so going to episode 6, we found out that Lilia puts the sigil on him, on the teen, and basically that kind of hides him away. So we get the explanation earlier that basically that no other witches can hear him, and that's why the sigil is put on him, is kind of hide him away. The cool thing there too is that we kind of have a flashback to when the teen William Kaplan, what happened to him and why did he get to go there to Agatha's house. So we see that he's at prom or homecoming. I can't remember which one.
So he's at his bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So he's basically going through his bar mitzvah. He's 13. So he's becoming a man. So this is, it's kind of funny. I like the way they did it, because I feel like that event and that occasion itself is kind of like a rebirth in a way, right? Like you're almost like going from being like a boy to a man, and then it's like after that traumatic event of the car accident that we see in the show, it's like he's a different person, right? So it's like the whole idea of him being a different person, I think ultimately after that event is, I like the way they did that. Obviously, it seems like she gave him that sigil to protect him because she saw it when she read his palm that there was like a split, meaning that there was most likely something involving another person or something. So I think her name's Lila. I think she noticed that there was something going on there when she had that premonition that he would be somebody. She inherently says like, you're a good boy, you're a good person. But obviously I think that was more directed towards William Kaplan, but I think she realized that like he might eventually be Billy. So she protected him, because she could have very well had a premonition, right, that they would eventually go on the Witch's Road together or something, right? Like, and Agatha might be involved, and I think she knew that Agatha might be around and that she was trying to protect the boy from Agatha. But yeah, I think that was very interesting, because it almost makes you believe right in that moment, right, that Tommy's out there somewhere. And they talk about it in this episode that, one of the questions we had was, what was it that Billy is trying to go down the witch's road for? And it's because he's trying to find his brother,
So we have a couple of new people with us this week. Atro AFR, welcome from Trovo, and Kevin Davis, welcome from YouTube. Kevin says Agatha All Along is getting better with each episode. Still not Marvel Studios' best television show. And that's good. And I still like what they're going with it. I like how they're tying things together and filling some holes, because we saw that the Hex event is what stopped William at his bar mitzvah and them going home. And then just all the hysteria, the car accident happening, him hitting the tree, him basically dying. And then, him waking up. And it seems like that's like the moment, I guess, at the end of WandaVision when she tells the boys goodnight when they're in their bed. And he's kind of saying that, and the first thing he does when he wake up is he calls out for Tommy.
Yep. And I like how
pretty cool scene.
I like how they did that scene where you have the heartbeat and then it just stops, and then it's like it starts again, because like obviously you realize that's when he's Billy.
Yep.
And yeah, I think you're exactly right. He calls out for Tommy and wakes up, and it's like he can feel Tommy, but he isn't sure where Tommy is exactly, right?
It's like
he's
he
like
feels like
connected.
his spirit or his soul type of thing.
Yeah, it's like almost like I feel like, they say like with twins sometimes they have like ESP with one another, right? Like I feel like it's kind of like that kind of thing going on. But ultimately, it's like, where is Tommy? And it seems like, they kind of address the whole thing that they believe Wanda's dead in this episode. So he's not looking for the power at the end of the Witch's Road to get Wanda back or to get Vision, because he expects Vision to be dismantled, which whether or not you agree with that is one thing. But anyways, he's looking for Tommy. And that's ultimately because like his powers, he can sense that Tommy's there, but he just doesn't know where he is. And I thought it was really cool how they kind of have been leaving the breadcrumbs for this. Like in an earlier episode, they talk about how he says to Alice, like, something traumatic happened to you when you were 13. And she talks about getting the tattoo that's going to protect her from the curse and everything. And then he says, something traumatic happened to me when I was 13. And that was this event about him becoming Billy Kaplan. And, it basically at the end of the day, I think that Wanda either inherently or accidentally did this, or maybe there is another being like Death or something that may have done this, because it seems like it's very crazy to me, right, to imagine that jump from the Hex. It almost feels like maybe we don't see Tommy until after he completes the Witch's Road. Because like it's like Tommy is out there like in an astral kind of like place. And then it's like once they complete the Witch's Road, then he'll be able to bring his brother back, kind of type of thing.
It'd be interesting to see too is that where his brother going to go, because we know now that Billy's older, so we know Tommy's going to be around the same age. So I wonder if we're going to get that appearance of Tommy at all, or just some kind of clue when this ends, when they get to the end of the road. But also too, it seems like he has powers right away. Like he can hear people's voices, hear what they're thinking. He has all, his powers are starting to show up. He can hear what his parents are saying. He talks to his friend or boyfriend about things, and then he kind of goes on like some discovery, which leads him to Agatha's house, where he breaks in and meets Agatha, and then they kind of go on the road. But it's interesting too when she asks him like, "What's your name?" He's like, "Billy Kaplan." She goes, "No, what's your name?" And he goes, "Billy Maximoff." So I thought that was pretty cool, as we'll reveal as he's talking to Agatha and going through that.
And like he breaks into her house to steal the little brooch that's got the maiden, the mother, and the crone on it, right?
The famous Agatha Harkness brooch.
Yeah. Exactly. And he opens it up and finds that there's like a little locket of hair in there. And I feel like that hair will end up being Rio's, and maybe there was some deal there or something, I feel like maybe that's going to have something to do with why she's lived so long, or dark power or something, some kind of deal there. Because we know that Rio won't kill her. That's already been said. But it seems like Billy hasn't really he doesn't really have control over his powers in this episode. You see that he's gone through, like, he's admitted to his boyfriend, number one, that he can't remember anything pre-accident. So it's basically like he's a new person. He pretends to, so his parents aren't suspicious
Yeah,
and
they
they
don't know
think
things
that
up.
he's
Yeah.
he's recovered and everything. But he pulls up a video, he sees the runes, he like starts picking up the breadcrumbs, he kind of figures out that, hey, like maybe I'm somebody else, and he kind of narrows it down. Wanda's dead, Vision's dismantled, Tommy's missing, maybe he's Billy Kaplan, and he starts pulling the breadcrumbs. And my most mind-blowing moment was the person that he meets when he's trying to put this all together, and I'll let you tell us who that is. So.
1 second. So from Jamie here, hey Jimmy is on with us as well today. Where is Rio doing this episode? All Lila and Jennifer still stuck in the mud. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. It feels like they're still stuck in the mud. I'm not sure where Rio's at this episode. It was kind of interesting that she's just kind of gone. This episode, I wonder if she kind of went off and had to do something, or now that things are kind of getting to where we have Tommy Maximoff now. I'm sorry, no, Billy Maximoff now, and that they're getting further down the road. Is she going to check in with somebody? What is she doing? But yeah, the big reveal. So they go on in the parking garage, and it's Ralph Bonner, right?
Yeah.
So Evan Peters is back as Ralph Bonner. I can't remember what he called himself first when he said I'm Ralph, and then he said something else for his name.
It was like something like the Boninator 69 or something like that. It was something like that. It was like almost like a Noob Master 69 kind of type name, And what's really funny to me is, like, I love Evan Peters. I loved him in American Horror Story. He's a phenomenal actor. I thought he was completely wasted in that role. So
I think he was wasted as Quicksilver.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I like him as Quicksilver, to be honest. I liked him in the Fox movies, but I think with him as like Ralph Boner, it's like, oh man, but yeah, I mean, like, kind of seeing his explanation about how he was under Wanda's control and then he was used by Agatha to like help
Agatha's husband or something like that, I think. Did he say?
No, yeah, so he was like, I was like her husband or whatever. Like, she like made me believe that I was like her husband or whatever, and she controlled him. And she was always talking about Ralph this, Ralph that. Like, and so he talks about he basically left his house, right?
Yep.
Because like she basically just took over and he just ran, and he was so terrified. And it seems like out of all the people of Westview, he's the most torn up, right? Like, he's like the one that he's not normal. Like, he thinks people are like chasing after him and following him and stuff like that. Like, I think a car goes off in the parking deck and he like freaks out about it.
I think they kind of missed a connection here too, because remember in WandaVision, Agent Wu had like someone that he was protecting or witness protection or that kind of thing. It's like they didn't tie that together in this episode. That would have been like the perfect time to be like, hey, that's the person that Agent Wu was looking for, the informant or the protection witness person or whatever it was, and that kind of stuff. Because the way that he was acting this episode was like he was on the run, he was on the lam type of thing. And it's funny too because he had that spray to kind of for Agatha and that kind of stuff, and he sprayed them, so that was all funny too as well. But I think it was a misconnection here with WandaVision and Agent Wu.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you on that. And one of the weird things that I will say that I noticed about WandaVision, which I just chalked it up to the fact that maybe they were under the influence of the spell, but there is a scene where there's two cops and Jimmy Woo walks up and he says something like Westview. The cops say Westview doesn't exist. There's Eastview, but they're like Westview. Now, like, I think that's just them being like mind controlled to believe that Westview doesn't exist, kind of type of thing. But I mean, who knows? But like, obviously going into this show, we learn that there is obviously a West View and an East View, right? So I think that's one of the weird kind of like things that I don't think there's a lot of cohesion on 100%, because they do make you kind of feel like this West View is a part of East View almost at the beginning of WandaVision. But obviously, it's like Billy comes into this person's body who's in Eastview, which is right next door to the Hex. And you see how this is going forward. I almost feel like we're going to end up with Tommy probably being in Eastview or something like that. But the other thing about that, though, is Billy has had 3 years, right? So it's been 3 years. So the whole entire time that Agatha's been underneath that spell has been 3 years. So for me, I was very shocked that the Salem 7 came after her so hard and so fast. Why not do it 3 years ago or during the
Yeah.
time she was under the spell? And I'm assuming that Wanda probably had her hidden underneath
Yep.
her spell, like people didn't know that she was there, kind of type of deal.
Yeah, I
So,
was as well, like that when or whatever Wanda did to her at the end of WandaVision, to Agatha, that kind of obviously suppressed who she was and suppressed the being able to find her, because you're right, because once that stopped, they were like on her.
yeah, like immediately, like,
Yeah.
you know, so I think like had Wanda would have not covered her up, they would have found her and killed her right away as soon as the
Could it have been
Darkhold
a
was
could
missing.
Wanda have put a sigil on her as well that we just don't know?
Maybe. And, you know, I think that's one of those things where it's like, you know, they do say at one point in WandaVision, Agatha says that you can't fix the spell of others, but then I feel like Billy sort of does fix the spell
Yeah.
on her, assuming at this point. But I mean, regardless of how you want to kind of spin it, it does seem kind of odd looking at it in this and kind of how they use it. I know magic's kind of one of those things you can kind of do whatever you want with it, you know. But yeah, we're seeing kind of like the bleed through with the runes. Billy talks about the runes connecting back to WandaVision that were a big point in how Wanda ultimately defeated Agatha, which was the runes, you know. So, you know, I think at the end of this episode, they doubled down. They kind of, you know, they just had to go harder with Ralph Boner, which, whatever, you know, it is what it is at this point. I feel like that character is just going to just disappear into obscurity and they won't do anything with it.
Yeah.
I liked your idea about like maybe that could be like the vessel for, you know, Tommy or something like that if they chose to do that or something. But
That would be a weird twist too. What the age wise though, I guess
it
they
would
might
be a
work.
lot older.
Yeah, they because they
You
wouldn't
know,
work as twins, but that would be a
yeah.
big twist. I know I've seen some chatter there from the usual people that report stuff that I follow, and they were saying even with the reveal about Raph Boner and then also with Billy Kaplan / Billy Maximoff, that there's even a bigger reveal coming. And I don't know if that's who Rio actually is. I don't know if we're gonna get actually Mephisto. I don't know if they're going to some way we get Tommy. Maybe it's Teddy. You know, it'd be an interesting twist that if we had, like, for example, when they get to the end of the Witch's Road and he confirms that Tommy's out there. I keep getting Tommy and Billy mixed up. That Tommy is out there somewhere, but he doesn't get him. But then it's all of a sudden we see him like back in Eastview or whatever as Billy Maximoff, and he meets a person named Teddy. And then the next thing we see is like Teddy and Billy go on this kind of like they kind of do some changes on the Children's Crusade a little bit. First they find Tommy, then they go looking for Agatha. Type of thing, and you know, maybe we get Hulkling at the end of this series as the way they do it, or maybe like the guy in the car with him. What was his name? His friend? They say what his name was? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't remember his name. No,
I didn't pay attention. I gotta go watch it again. I was like,
I don't think they said his name, to be
Okay.
honest. I think they kind of left that out on purpose. Maybe that's like they're gonna do something with that. You know,
maybe he's Teddy.
Yeah, that might. And you know, I will say this. This is a weird stretch, but you know, Teddy does in the comics have big arms, right?
Yep.
Like, and there is a scene where he's like, "Oh, put those arms away," you know. So like, maybe it's a big stretch there, but you know, like, maybe he is Teddy. It definitely feels like that episode, what they did with that character, they brought him into a lot of parts of that episode, and he was part of the journey of him figuring it out all the way up until he broke up into Agatha's house and stole that brooch. Like, basically it was like, and so like after that happened, you remember Agatha and him are driving down the road and he's calling him a bunch and he's like, oh, he worries, like he's freaking out. So it seems like, you know, there is some sort of like connection there where maybe that will continue because they have put that kid a lot in this episode and have referenced him previously in another episode. So maybe they are going to do something.
Because that's where my mind went too. I'm like, is this guy Teddy? Is he going to end up being Teddy? Because I have to watch it again to make sure. Because maybe I was too focused on him being Teddy that I didn't listen for his name. And that's what I kept thinking. I'm like, I'm gonna go wild if they make him Teddy at the end of this series, and Billy and Teddy are the ones that start off with the Children's Crusade to kind of go look for Tommy, and then they go looking for Agatha, or maybe that's how we go into the Vision series and they go find Vision first before going looking for Wanda.
One thing that I do think that they might do at the end of this is Billy will get to the end of the Witch's Road and bring back Tommy, and he won't know who it is. So, like, let's just imagine there's like some 16-year-old kid that's like in a hospital in a coma, and he wakes up and it's Tommy Shepard, and they have him wake up, and then he wakes up and he realizes he has his speed, and he just takes off. Boom, leaves Eastview. He's in Eastview. He takes off running, and he goes and finds the Vision, and that's like the Vision series. Yeah,
it'd be kind of cool that if we get a scene similar to in WandaVision when Monica came back from the snap, from the blip, whatever that, that when we saw her wake up in the hospital like that, it'd be kind of cool that if all of a sudden we see Tommy Shepard wake up in the hospital, like you said, all of a sudden his eyes are open, like they get to the end of the road, he hears Tommy's voice, hears something, finds something, and that same time they go like a split screen, and we see someone waking up in the hospital, like out of a coma, like you said, and calling out for Billy.
Yep, and
and like you said, he wakes up and then takes off running.
They should do it though, to where Billy calls out Tommy, and he like reaches, like, we'll say like a big blue light at the end of the Witch's Road, and he touches it and he calls out Tommy, and Tommy is asleep, and you just hear Tommy, and then he opens up his eyes, and boom, like that would be really, really cool if they do that, because like obviously we're moving forward with, they're basically like reincarnated at this point. That's kind of going back to the Children's Crusade. I mean, that's kind of what this links to. So I think kind of moving forward, however they do this, obviously this is a spin-off of a prequel to the Multiverse of Madness, but I feel like this show is going to end up being spun off into the Vision show, which this show spun off from the WandaVision show. So, it's very crazy, I feel like, the path that we kind of end up here. But I feel like we're going to at least get Tommy referenced or seen by the end of this show.
Is it a prequel to Multiverse of Madness, though? Because remember, there's that 3-year gap.
Well, no, I'm saying like this is a spinoff of the prequel to Multiverse of Madness, with like WandaVision being the prequel.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood you there.
No, you're good. It's confusing.
Do you think any of this invalidates anything of Wanda's journey in Multiverse of Madness, or do you think with the sigil being on Billy, and then we not knowing where Tommy is right now, that the kids are there the entire time, where she kind of went through the multiverse rampage looking for them?
So two things. Number one, I feel like for me, when I watched Multiverse of Madness, I felt like all the progress Wanda had made in WandaVision at the end of the show just went right out the window, right? Like, it was just like it never happened. It was like, oh, she took the Darkhold, became evil. It seemed like she did not learn her lesson from whatever. Like, she went from, like, yeah, I did wrong to have a family and control a town, to I'm going to kill everybody to have my children back. And it was like, oh, wow. So, obviously, like, she just wanted to kind of jump dimensions. And in that movie, you see there are other universes where she does have her kids, and they seem to be living, and they're younger, and that, kind of point where they were like, what was it, 10 or 11 or something that they had aged up to, and she made sure that they stopped aging at that point because they started aging themselves up. Yep. So I do think that there is kind of like a legitimacy in the fact of that this, it doesn't validate, I think, that show and then the movie of the journey, but I think it does kind of point to one key thing, and that's the fact that the difference between Wanda is Agatha was willing to give up her children or her child for power and to have the Darkhold, and ultimately everything goes back to power for her. But Wanda ultimately has basically, she's all powerful for the most part at this point, right? But Wanda still, with all that power, just wanted her kids back. So it's like her and Agatha are kind of like reverse.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you look at what happened in WandaVision, and you can almost like allow it in my mind, because it's like she was trying an alternative method of using the Darkhold and went crazy to get her kids back.
Yep.
And then it doesn't help the fact that she hears Billy calling out to her at the end of WandaVision when she's using the Darkhold.
Yep.
So it's like, you know, these kids have souls and everything, but I think the most interesting thing for me is I feel like Agatha all along maybe does validate the events of Multiverse of Madness a little bit more for me, because I think it like makes me realize that like, yeah, Wanda was the villain of that movie, but you know, Agatha's like the villain of her own show is where I think we're going with this. So it's like, even though Wanda was like a villain, she wasn't as bad as like an Agatha, right? Like what she ultimately was doing was for her children, not to get power or something, right? Like, and yeah, I mean, like, I think kind of going forward, I like this as an addition to that, to WandaVision and to the Multiverse of Madness movie, because I think it smooths the story a little bit in a way. I
It's
could be
almost like
wrong on that.
they built a universe within a universe with this, and I like your explanation of that, because I've seen chatter back and forth on social media about that subject, about, you know, does this invalidate Multiverse of Madness, has, you know, this kind of stuff. I like the way you put it out there, so I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's hard, to be honest, because it's like, you know, obviously it seems like we know this is a sacred timeline that this is all happening on, right? So it seems like there's a reason why maybe in this version of the universe versus the 838, this Billy is going to be older. This Billy is going to, you know, whatever. So it's like one of those things. Obviously, I feel like there's going to be something that they're going to use this moving forward and everything. There is a bigger connection I can talk about later. I think that Billy might have, that it's like one of those things where I feel like the Scarlet Witch was foretold of in the Darkhold, right? Like they knew in the Darkhold, it said one day the Scarlet Witch will come. I feel like part of the Scarlet Witch's prophecy was she would ultimately create something like Billy that would then end up being part of like a loop almost, in a way.
Well,
And
we saw Billy too in Mount Wundagore as well, next to her. So
yeah, and I think that's part of that prophecy, right? Like where it's like ultimately once the Scarlet Witch becomes like a thing, like she can basically create life and do magic as she wants. That's what she did.
yep.
And that's what I think Billy ultimately is going to be. I mean, obviously Tommy will play a part into that, but I think in like the whole magical side of things kind of moving forward in the MCU, I think Billy will be a large part of that, because it was like almost destiny that Wanda had to create him, if that makes sense.
And so like they can, like I said, do a Children's Crusade type story. There's Young Avengers they could go with, you know, the whole Vision series we got coming as well, to see where that goes with this, or is that even tied to this at all? Do they kind of keep Vision separate? And because I know they talk about Viv, and because he had two other kids, Viv and
oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, or does it focus on him out there and having those other two kids, and we don't see that the whole tie to Vision and the Maximoff boys again? So it'll be interesting to see how they do that and how that ties in, and still with the rumored Scarlet Witch project as well. I almost feel like that it's gonna be weird how they're gonna fit this in, where everything's going towards like Secret Invasion, Battle War, and Doomsday. But it'd be kind of cool. A couple of things would be neat to see on screen, though. One, if we see at the end of WandaVision, you know, maybe he does go off to Mount Wundagore looking for her, where it got basically where she tore it down at the end of Multiverse of Madness. Two, Doomsday would be kind of cool to see that once he comes over to this universe, that we see that maybe he finds Scarlet Witch. We see him rolling up on what's the bear? I'm forgetting the bear's name. But he rolls up on the bear in the snow, and he has like, and he has Wanda draped over him. After finding her in Mount Wundagore, because we know that Doom has, and it depends if they do Doom. I'm still kind of interested to see how they do that with this direction they've gone, technology and magic. So that'll be interesting as well. But yeah, the whole tummy piece of this is Billy's boyfriend, is that Teddy, you know, and we know that he kind of got snarky with Agatha at the end. He's like, I'm not here to help you get to the road. You know, I want to get to the end of the road to find my brother. Pretty much is what he tells her. And then she's like, the nice ones are if you're the last ones are the nice ones, something like that. She said, and he's like, I'm not so nice. You know, as they're walking off. And still, yeah, interesting to see too where Lila and Jennifer are at this, because we didn't see them that much. past the mud piece, and then Rio as well for the next episode.
It seems like Jennifer and Lila are stuck in the mud, probably still, right? Like I'm assuming they're probably trapped or they're like being bound. I'm not sure if they're being bound by Billy. I think they're more being bound by the Witch's Road itself, because they said earlier on, right? Like when you step off the road, like that's where you get in trouble. Like remember Mrs. Hart had her purse eaten and was complaining that it was from Talbot's and the Witch's Road would not take her purse. So I thought that was a really funny scene, but that's what I think is kind of happening there. You know, obviously he does the same to Agatha. And at that point I was kind of like, well, he just blasted her with his magic. So, I mean, does that mean she could take his magic right now? You know?
Well,
but
it was funny too, because when he tried to use magic at one point, his hands kind of like, he couldn't do it. And she kind of gave him that look, you know, and my mind went to, do you remember the movie, The Last Dragon? Where Sho'nuff's like going, like his hands are crackling, but he doesn't have the power anymore. Yeah. That went right to my head when he couldn't do that when he was standing there at the end of the episode.
Yeah, and you know, obviously it seems like, you know, Agatha makes a very good point, which is he has a tell that he's the Scarlet Witch's son. And that tell is he gets emotional and uses magic. Like whenever the emotions get involved, that's when like he kind of loses control a little bit. And that is like something straight up that the Scarlet Witch does, right? So we've seen her do that several times in the MCU. That's oftentimes when she becomes more powerful, is through traumas. And I think this is going to end up being one of those things where I think it will end up being the same for him. But I got this weird kind of like scenario where I feel like at the end of this thing, let's pretend that all the other witches die and we end up with just like it. That's what I feel like they were trying to frame by the end of this, where Rio's not in the shot and the other two witches are gone, which is this thing's going to come down to like a Billy / Agatha kind of button heads at the end of the Witch's Road kind of type of thing.
I hope they don't kill off Jennifer, because she has other things. You know, she was part of Midnight Suns. She has ties to Man-Thing.
Ghost Rider.
Yeah, Ghost Rider as well. So I hope they don't kill her off, and I hope, you know, we do get other things with Jennifer Kale as well.
Yeah, I think that this show is going to end up with Billy and Agatha basically at the finish line of the Witch's Road, and it's going to be like she's going to become all powerful and she's going to get what she wants, and then he's going to have to worry about her, but at the same time he can get what he wants, which is his brother back. And it's going to be one of those things where it's like you get exactly what you want, but you also got to watch over your shoulder at the same time, because Agatha's probably going to try and backstab him.
I wonder if she changes this time from this adventure because the whole thing with Billy and Wanda, that instead of her getting her power back that she had before, she gets her son back instead.
Yeah, and if they don't do that, I feel like there is a very strong possibility where Agatha will end up seeing like the error of her ways. Maybe we don't see Nicholas Scratch, but Billy Maximoff ends up becoming like a surrogate son for her in a way, like where she ends up not, you know, stabbing him in the back at the end of this, and ends up being like, okay, and maybe she helps Billy find Tommy. Maybe that's where this ends up. Maybe we end up with another project. I almost don't feel like that's going to happen, right? I feel like maybe Tommy will pop up in something with Vision and go and find Vision and remember that. And then, but, I think it's going to be interesting no matter how they end this. I mean, we've got 3 episodes left after this one?
8 or 9?
I thought it was 9 episodes. I might be wrong.
Let me double check.
But I feel like at the end of this show, they're going to be doing something. I mean, they've gone through quite a few trials now. I think Rio's kind of just floating out there, right? Like Rio's just going to pop in and be valid when it's needed on the Witch's Road. But I feel like, you know, they're kind of trying to paint that picture at the end of this episode, that at the end of this thing, it's going to be Billy versus Agatha kind of type of thing.
Yep, you're right. So, it's 9 episodes.
Yeah. So I think with Rio, next episode will probably be a bigger episode for her, but I would imagine probably the episode after that, they're going to probably explain more of her and Agatha's relationship.
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe the next episode we might see that when she shows back up or something, because this was more Billy focused this episode. Maybe the next one will be back a big Agatha focused episode.
Yeah, and I think they've kind of explained a lot of the other origins and motivations of the other witches and stuff. Rio's really the only one that we don't know anything about. I mean, to be honest, we know more about the Salem 7 than we do about
Yeah.
Rio.
Yeah.
And it's like the only thing we really know about the Salem 7 is they're the kids of the coven that Agatha killed to take their power. So obviously they have some sort of agenda against her and they want revenge. That makes sense. But for Rio, it's like we know that she's got some kind of agenda with Agatha, but she says she can't kill her, but she can get as close to killing her as she wants without actually doing it, things like that. So it's like one of those things where I feel like Rio, number one, is there to see Agatha suffer. She wants to see her struggle and fight her way through this on the Witch's Road. But obviously, she's there because, let's say that she's got a connection to death. She might be there to see how many people die around Agatha, because the last time she walked the Witch's Road, it was said that she came out as the only witch, right?
Yep.
So there's probably some assumption that there's going to be a lot of death around her. So, especially this time around. So,
well, that's our conversation on Agatha All Along, episodes 5 and 6. We'll see on, or actually, we don't have Sunday this week because we did it today. So we'll see if after episode 7, we'll probably reconvene for that one, or maybe we'll do another double up before the finale episode for Agatha All Along.
I wonder if they're going to do like a 2-part finale kind of type of thing where they do like obviously the 8th episode leads into the 9th and they leave us on a big cliffhanger. I hope they kind of do that. And then I hope they don't do that, obviously, but like, I feel like there's a couple of things in this show that I've not really hated, but I haven't really been the biggest fan of. But I think that last episode was like the best written episode 6 in this show. And seeing it kind of move forward, it really made me boost this show up a little bit, because it's like I love this show already. I liked it a lot, but I really like it a lot more after this most recent episode. I thought they did a really good job with the most recent episode. So,
okay, moving on to the news and rumors. There's not a lot, so we'll get this very quickly this week. So we'll start with Spider-Man 4. Via Cosmic Circus, new details for actually Jamie. Do we have any predictions about Comic-Con announcements? As this is the newer Comic-Con one that's going on right now, and Monty from the group is there. I saw his story. He's at NYCC right now. There was a new Marvel logo released, and it looks like they confirmed upcoming projects. Even Ironheart was on there. And so it looks like they have that logo out that's showing the projects coming out here pretty soon in some of those series. But other than that, yeah, I'm interested to see if we get like official details about like Spider-Man 4. But usually that's going to be like a Sony Marvel joint announcement. Also, too, in the other projects or series as well. Maybe a Blade, hopefully some Blade news. Maybe some Armor Wars news, because Ironheart is still coming and she was on there. And so we'll have to see what comes from that. So good question there, Jamie. But back to Spider-Man 4, Cosmic Circus, new details. The film will feature several symbiotes, so which that ties in with Venom: The Last Dance, and this not being the first appearance of Noel, the last appearance of Noel. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are likely to reprise their roles, which I'm not sure about this one, but with Noel in the multiverse, anything could happen, I guess. The plot appears to be shifting towards a cosmic narrative instead of a street level story, which obviously with the whole Venom, The Last Dance, and that Noel's not going to be a one and done type character, and they're kind of setting that up for the future.
You know what scares me about that, though, is the fact that they're talking about bringing back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, because it's like, obviously I know that third Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, with those two coming back, the Andrew Garfield being in a third movie and Tobey Maguire being in a fourth made bukus of money. I mean, it made so much money, right? But I feel like they're going to totally cheapen out and be like, hey, let's do that again and make even more money. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's so unneeded. Like,
it would be better, though, if they did like small cameos, like maybe with the symbiote stuff in Noel, they do like a flashback of Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire's Venom with Topher Grace. And then maybe they talk about that maybe there was a symbiote in Andrew Garfield's, but it never materialized in anything. Or what could be cool too is a post-credit scene with them both, which leads to for Secret Wars. That kind of gives a tease of Secret Wars this early. That'd be kind of cool because if we figure one, if not both of them, will be in Secret Wars as well. So there's a couple ways, or maybe when the symbiote hits Peter, Holland's Peter Parker, he kind of gets that vision of all the Hive stuff and across the multiverse, and we see the Maguire one, and we see a symbiote going towards Garfield but never gets to him, type of thing. So that could be cool for cameos for Spider-Man 4.
One of the things that's the most confusing thing in the world to me is, obviously we saw in No Way Home that Venom pops into that movie and leaves a piece of himself and then goes back to his universe. But then we know that the Vulture is part of the MCU, but then was seen in a scene, was he not, with Morbius? Yeah. So if they're all from the same universe, where did Venom go back to? And it's just like, it just becomes like a logistics problem for me. So I hope they don't really try and work too hard to figure that out, and they try and push the boundaries to do something, because I think there's some logistics issues. But I think with this Venom movie, bringing in Null is great. That's exciting. I think
as long as it's not one and done, they don't Sony-ize them. So
yeah, and I find it really hard that they could kill that villain off, very easily. I mean, it is, one of those things where they kill off villains in these types of movies repeatedly for whatever reason. So I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow do it and then have a flashback of him. I don't think they're going to, by the way that it sounds, but it would be absolutely horrifying if they somehow killed Null off at the end of the
even see them doing it at Spider-Man 4. They could defeat him but not kill him, or stop whatever's coming, and maybe we see Null again as part of Secret Wars or Doomsday type of thing. So
there's so many villains out there that can be just left alone and can be a reoccurring villain and come back and cause more issues. And symbiotes are kind of like one of those things where they go away for a while and they come back and they cause more problems. So, it's kind of like Kang the Conqueror in that regard. You defeat Kang one time and then all of a sudden a week later, he pops back up again and now he's a new problem. So, it's kind of how I feel like they need to do that. I'm interested to see how this kind of plays into the MCU, and if this plays nice with the MCU, and if this develops into anything.
And there's still chatter that Sony still wants to do a Sinister Six movie as well. So yeah,
I wonder who that Sinister Six would be. Have they said? Or
maybe they start off with Vulture, Morbius, and Kraven.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would assume that those
and Rhino.
Yeah, and Rhino would probably be, because Rhino will be in that Kraven movie. So and that Kraven movie comes out soon, doesn't it?
It got pushed back. I think, is it next year now? Is it still this year, or is it early next year? I can't remember. I know they pushed it back for some reshoots.
I thought it might have been November, but I might be wrong about that.
Let's look it up real quick before I go on to what some Tom Holland stuff here. This is 2024, December 13th. So still this year.
Okay, so it's December now. But yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting to see what they kind of move forward with. I think at this point, Sinister Six movie, if they're going to use all these villains, it's going to be hard for them to kind of weave a narrative that really makes a lot of sense, right?
Yep.
So we'll see what they do. But
so Tom Holland did have some things he said about Spider-Man 4. He says there was already a draft for it. He said, I read it 3 weeks ago, and it's really lit a fire in me. Zendaya and I sat down, read it together, and at times we're bouncing around the living room. This is a real movie worthy of fans' respect. He also expressed that if somehow they bring Miles Morales into the MCU, he would love to mentor a young actor. He compared this desire to how Robert Downey Jr. guided him at the start of his journey. He also says he wants to make many more Spider-Man movies, saying, I want to make another one. I want to make many more, but I want to do it for the right reasons. It sounds like Holland's a pretty level-headed person when it comes to this stuff. So, speaking of Spider-Man stuff, Venom, via IGN, Venom Last Dance director and co-writer Kelly Marcel told IGN via email, we needed to lay the foundation of the Venom character and his relationship with Eddie before introducing him. This is just the beginning for Null. It says, beyond this trilogy, there are more stories to explore. God is coming. So this sounds like more than Venom, The Last Dance, more than Spider-Man 4. Maybe they'll do a whole thing with Null on the Sony side of things.
Maybe they'll do one of those things where the last dance will end where they think they've beaten the villain being Null, and it's really just like the first wave. It's
Yep.
kind of like how, like, you know, the first Avengers movie was, right? Like that was just
With
kind of like,
Thanos. Yeah.
like it was sent by Thanos, but it's kind of really his first wave of his attack, really,
Yep.
you know? So I feel like they might do something a little similar.
King news, via Den RPK, the reason they decided to drop King wasn't just because of Majors. When they were looking at to recast the role, they realized there wasn't much hype around the character, so they went with a gimmick casting of RDJ as Doom to get people excited for the Avengers films. To be fair, I think it worked. The RDJ announcement is the most viewed video on Instagram. Now, I get it because they had King be defeated by ants, you know, so I get people kind of stepping back. You know, you know, in some sense, since we don't know what they're going to do with King after Quantumania, you know, that does seem short-sighted that ants defeated him, that and Ant-Man defeated him. Like we talked about before, it would have been a good thing where he tricked them. You know, it's kind of that whole thing like you think you won, but I'm King, I just come back another way. Or he went into the same place where his ship was. Or not a ship, but that what was he looking for? That he had to get Scott to
He's
get for
looking
him.
for the core.
Yeah, the core force ship. Thank you, the power source.
Mhm.
You know, maybe he got shrunk down to one of those things, or he went down to a lower part of the quantum realm, only to come back even more stronger later on. So there's ways they could have done that if they continue with Kang, but it's just disappointing because, you know, I guess I have to go watch Avengers Assemble and Earth's Mightiest Hero cartoons again for the King stuff because they did it right.
Yeah, and I will hate to say this, but I actually kind of like the way that he was defeated in Quantum Mania with the ants. I know it's kind of ridiculous, but it's kind of like one of those great moments where it's like, you know, obviously we got Scott Lang as Ant-Man, but they always kind of put Hank Pym on the shelf in the MCU. Like we kind of got to see a little bit of him, but him coming back and being like such a big difference maker in that movie is kind of like, yeah, that's why he's the original Ant-Man, you know, kind of type of moment, I think. So I think that's why, like, you know, I kind of do like that moment. And yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that Kang was like defeated that way, but I think for a lot of people, like the multiverse stuff has been so confusing. And I think the whole thing with the multiple different variants of Kang and stuff, they were gonna be confused. And I think them kind of like making these shows and things like Loki was obviously a big hit, right? But Loki wasn't a big hit because of the whole multiverse wars and the stuff with Kang. It was because it was Loki. So I think kind of moving forward, I kind of do see why some people would be happier kind of moving towards RDJ as Doom. Because one, it's a familiar face, right? Like everybody loves RDJ. RDJ kind of propped up the front end of the MCU, and I guess he's going to prop up this end now, you know, phases 4, 5, and 6. So,
I don't know. I feel like we're gonna miss out on the whole Doom experience by doing this. You know, I don't think we're gonna get that. And you know, like, you know, Andy, our other co-host on the show, who's not with us right now, has said, you know, seeing things from the villain's perspective, like you could almost do like a whole series with just Doom and figuring out like from his origin all the way to why he does stuff, relationship with Wanda, all that kind of stuff. You could do the same thing with Kang too. It's like you don't need the rest of the MCU to do a Kang thing. You could do like a whole thing about Kang, you know, from start to finish, you know, through Victor Timely, through all the variants, through you know, He Who Remains, all that kind of stuff, and just focus on that, and then bring in the whole Ravonna thing and that. You could just do that piece of it all from Kang's point of view. The same thing you could do it from Doom's point of view. You don't need to do everything else. So I think we're gonna miss out on that. I hope they, you know, like I don't think we're gonna get Doom bots or if we're gonna, you know, probably explore the whole thing with him and Wanda or even his background. I think it's gonna be more of like he'll be there in the Fantastic Four universe, because it's already chatter that him and Reed won't be as confrontational or as close as they are in the comics. So it's almost like some event happens that, you know, like either before or at the same time that Doom ends up in the main universe, and then something happens with Fantastic Four where they end up as well in the main universe. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm not, honestly, I don't know. I could probably eat my words on this later, but I'm not the most excited for Fantastic Four still, or this whole thing with Doom right now.
That's kind of where I'm at, right? Like with the Fantastic Four, and I hate to make this joke, but technically it's the third time's the charm. Really, it's the fourth time's the charm because they did make a movie in the 90s, but you know, it's like the Fantastic Four has been made so many times already, and I don't really feel like they've gotten it right really any of the times. I actually kind of like the way that they did the movie in the 90s that they made that never really made it to distribution, because I like the way they explained their powers and how they got them, and it's kind of like mirrors of their personality and everything. But you know, obviously the one with what's his name, Chris Evans, and you know, I thought he
Michael
did great.
Chiklis and Ian Grufford and
Yeah,
Jessica
yeah,
Alba. Yep.
yeah. I thought Michael Chiklis is the best thing. I
He
loved
got the
him as
voice
the thing.
too.
Yeah, dude, and he looked great in the costume. I loved it. But you know, Doom has always been something that has never really been done well, I think, in those movies, and very sad to see them want to connect Doom again to another Fantastic Four movie or project. You know.
I don't think they'll connect him as much, like maybe like a post credits or some kind of crossing, but I don't think it's going to be like we've seen in the past. So it's still going to be different. He won't be as intimate with Reed and Sue as he has been in the past. But I don't know. I still love the Fantastic Four cartoons. I love how it started off where they already had their powers. They're on a talk show. They're explaining it that way, and then you kind of go through the gallery of the whole like things you have like Blastar, and you have like the Annihilation Wave, that kind of stuff. You have Footmaster, you have Mole Man, and you know the whole thing with the not the Eternals, with Inhumans,
Mhm.
as well, the whole Johnny Crystal relationship, you know, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So
I think my problem with the Fantastic Four, right, is it's kind of like my issue with like the new Superman movie, right? Like how many Superman movies have there been? There's been a ton, right? Like, and it's like, you know, it's so hard to like keep they same thing with Batman movies and stuff. But the thing is like there have been Superman movies that have been successful, but a lot of Batman movies were successful. But it feels like to me with the Fantastic Four, really none of these movies were extremely
the
successful, and
first
they
two
should have
kind of
been.
were. The first two,
Sort of, kind
yeah.
of, yeah. But you know, like they weren't like blockbusters. Like, you know, like obviously, whenever I think of Fantastic Four, I always think of like from a movie like live action perspective. I always think about the ones with Michael Chiklis and Chris Evans and stuff, because like the next one, I don't even want to think about like that next franchise that they started, the one that came after that.
Michael B. Jordan and what's his name?
Yeah, and it's got the other girl that was in
Miles
House.
Teller and Kate Mara,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I forgot who played Doom.
yeah. But you know, Doom was not a fan of the way he looked in that. And I think that's like ultimately the issue with the Fantastic Four is they've got to be different, but at the same time, they've got to be the same, right? And that's where this is hard, where it's like you have to keep it similar to what we've already had, but better.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the hardest part, I think. Like Rise of the Silver Surfer, I don't think would have been that bad had it would have not been for the fact that they made Galactus a giant cloud. Like, you know, like that movie, in my opinion, if they would just fix that one part, that movie would probably go up another point or
Yep.
two on my scale, you know? So,
And I guess also what bugs me too, I'm still not that excited about the cast of this new one.
yeah.
You know, I guess once I see a trailer, you know, I've the shots of the thing I've seen, it looks like they're doing some practical effects with how they're doing the thing. So I like that, but I don't know that this cast never really excited me either as well, especially with the Reed casting.
I think Kirby as Sue Storm is an excellent casting. Like she looks just like how I would imagine Sue Storm would look like in real life. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think the kid that's playing the Human Torch, Joseph Quinn, he's from Stranger Things. I had fan cast him as Pyro for myself, so the fact that he's playing Human Torch is just funny to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I feel like I was in the same vein, right? But you know, I think that obviously we just saw Pyro in the Deadpool movie, so you know, I don't think we'll be seeing him anytime soon. And maybe way down the line in an X-Men movie or something like that. But you know, I think he's a decent casting for Human Torch. I don't know how I feel about the Thing, and I'm not a big fan of
Evan
of
Moss.
I mean, I don't really hate him. He was in the Punisher show, I believe. So,
I,
but
I I love him as cousin in The Bear.
mhm.
So I love him in that, and his arc in that story. So I'm interested to see how he pulls the Thing off.
It's Mr. Fantastic, which is where I'm struggling with this, and I don't think that casting was right. I don't think it was close to being right at all. I feel like what is his name? I cannot think of his name for some reason. I'm drawing a blank. The guy who's playing Mr. Fantastic.
Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal, thank you. Pedro Pascal is like, he's become like the dad, right, of a lot of stuff, like, and he's kind of taken like a fatherly role. He's been in a few of those, obviously, like The Mandalorian with Grogu. He was in that show that was based on a video game that I cannot think of the name of.
The Last of Us.
Yes, thank you. He's in The Last of Us. That's another one. But yeah, I feel like that's why he kind of got this role, is because he's been kind of in that typecast lately of being like a good dad kind of like role. So I feel like that's why we kind of got him. But I just wish they would have cast somebody else, because I feel like that was not the choice. It didn't even have to be John Krasinski, and I'm not saying it should be John Krasinski, but I'm just saying, like,
I was fine with not having Krasinski. Like, he had his 5 minutes in Multiverse of Madness. They got that out of the way. I did not want to see him at again.
And I'm just like, I think this is one of those things where I've talked about, like, for the casting of the Fantastic Four, it's so hard to do because it has to be perfect, right? Like, it needs to be perfect, because this is, like I said, the 4th time that we're doing this. Like, and I know, like, movies get remade and stuff, but, like, this needs to be the right way this time, and they need to do something different. So I don't know if I would have gone with Pedro Pascal. He's a great guy, though. He seems like he's nice enough.
I liked him as Max Lord. I don't know. I liked him in that movie as that.
I didn't. I thought he was goofy and funny and everything. Like, it's so weird because, like, when I first saw him in that movie in Wonder Woman 84, I didn't recognize that was Pedro Pascal. I don't know why.
Exactly. I liked him in that role, and it's the way he did the role. I liked it. It wasn't like a typical him, and that's why I liked the Mandalorian. They showed his face as well, because you didn't, it was not him.
Yeah. So I really wish they would have gone differently, but I'm happy with at least a couple of the castings. I think the Sue Storm casting is probably like the best one to me. I think she'll be perfect as Sue Storm.
Yeah.
But
I wish they would have gone outside the box for Reed, like Andy was saying, Dev Patel, or the one guy that was in Quantumania who had the powers, who could read people's minds.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That actor, or something like that. Just something way out of the box for Reed and change it up from what we've seen. Jimmy from the chat here says, "I adore Pedro Pascal, but nothing about him says Reed Richards to me." Exactly. I don't know, that whole smart, brainy, nerdy type. I don't see it.
He would have been so perfect as Forge in the MCU.
Yeah.
Like, I would have loved to have seen him as Forge, but obviously we can talk about our own personal typecast for characters, or just castings that we would want. But yeah, I mean, he's just another one of those. It's back to the whole RDJ thing. It feels like it's kind of that way with Doom, right? Where it's like he wore a costume where he was in an Iron Man suit. Doom wears an iron suit. It's quite similar. Let's ram RDJ in there. And I feel like that's kind of what they did with Pedro Pascal, which is like, he plays a lot of these fatherly roles. Let's just put him in as, the first family, and cast him as Reed Richards. So
it was William Jackson Harper.
Okay.
Was the one who played Quaz in Quantumania. Him, another one I liked as the role, just something different outside the box. But anyways, we can keep going on this, but I'll move on. New Iron Man series via Variety. Disney Plus is creating a new animated kids featuring Iron Man. So it's gonna be a series, animated series. Disney Junior has greenlit Marvel's Iron Man and His Awesome Friends. The first Iron Man preschool series set for a summer 2025 debut on Disney Junior and Disney Plus. Currently in production, the series will feature a young Tony Stark and his world-saving besties, Riri Williams, Ironheart, and Amadeus Cho, Iron Hulk. The 3 cartoon heroes work together to protect their city and each other. So it almost sounds like a new version of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yeah, interesting.
Wear It by Night news via Brandon Davis YouTube. Michael Giacchino shares insights on a follow-up to Wear It by Night. Michael Giacchino says there's been a lot going on in the industry and everyone's sort of recalibrating. I think certain things had to be put aside for the moment. We'll get there. So I don't know what that means, like another Wear It by Night, Elsa Bloodstone, a Man Thing. Maybe we get a Moon Knight. Maybe that means the Midnight. Maybe we get Midnight Suns or Ghost Rider. But it looks like there's more to come there that is in the pipeline that we just don't know about yet.
Interesting.
Jon Stewart news. Via Deadline, Aaron Pierre has been cast as Jon Stewart in the Lantern series. I actually loved him in Rebel Ridge. So that's pretty good. And also via Deadline, HBO and Max have officially announced Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan. So I think it's gonna be a pretty cool like mentor-mentee type of role with those two. I actually really enjoyed Kyle Chandler in Friday Night Lights series. In the Bloodline series on Netflix as well. I liked him also. I'd love to see him in some kind of role in the MCU. Like he'd make a great type of agent, type of thing.
So my theory for this Lantern show is that they're going to have Guy Gardner, and this is just my opinion because I noticed that Nathan Fillion never plays roles, I think, for James Gunn that are more than like a couple appearances. Yeah. Like, so I feel like Guy Gardner is going to appear in the Superman movie, and then he'll make his appearance in the Green Lantern show, but he'll die and he'll
killed. Pass it over to Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan type of thing.
Well, what I think will happen is he'll die and his ring will go to Jon Stewart. Okay. Jon Stewart will become his replacement. And then as his replacement, Jon Stewart will then be trained by Hal Jordan to be a part of the Green Lantern Corps. And basically they're going to try and work together. Number one, as like a mentor and mentee kind of thing. But number two, I think they're going to probably try and work together to figure out who killed Guy Gardner. And, you know, what led to the event of Jon Stewart getting his ring. And I think that would be a great way to start this show. And I'm hoping they do that.
I was thinking the opposite, to where like Guy Gardner's goes to Hal Jordan. And then Hal Jordan, another Lantern dies. And then Hal Jordan is forced to find the new Lantern that places that. And then they go and do that whole investigation of the one who kills the one who gets the ring that Jon Stewart gets, that Lantern. Was the one I was thinking. Maybe not though, but I like yours better.
One thing I will say that I think that is a big possibility though is if they do that, Guy Gardner might die, but he could totally come back as like another Lantern down the road. Yeah. Like, you know, he could come back as a Red Lantern or something like that. And you could have Nathan Fillion make like one more appearance. I don't know how many seasons of this show they could do, but in my opinion, they could do 8 seasons, 10 seasons of the Lantern show. But yeah, if they do something like that, I think they've got a real opportunity to kind of throw kind of like a little bit of a mix up in there and get rid of Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, which I'm not happy about. I don't like him as Guy Gardner. I think he looks ridiculous as Guy Gardner, but I think they'll probably end up getting rid of him long term and giving his ring to Jon Stewart.
You know what's funny? It's like Nathan Fillion is to James Gunn as Bruce Campbell is to Sam Raimi.
Yeah, dude. Oh my lord. Yeah, honestly, and you know, either that or that car that Sam Raimi uses in all of his movies. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? The one that was in like Multiverse of Madness and all the way back into like the Spider-Man movie, and I think movies all the way back to like the 80s that he's done or something. So yeah, I'm not the biggest Nathan Fillion fan, but I think at the end of the day, he probably will end up being done as Guy Gardner and end up cast as somebody else in the DC movies moving forward, because that's kind of his role, right? He kind of just like plays multiple different characters that are kind of like C-list characters for James Gunn a lot of the time. So
The Boys, we have a new cast member for the final season. Mason Dye has been cast as Bomb Sight in the final season. No news on Jared Padalecki yet.
I was getting ready to ask. I have a very bad feeling that we will never hear that news. So.
They have to do that Thor character and do the Eternity Gauntlet. They have to do it.
And they need to let Jensen Ackles have a scene with him too. That would be really, really funny.
That'd be wild to do that. Invincible news. Amazon Prime did release a video with the teaser. February 6th, the next season is coming of Invincible.
Okay.
Go ahead. You were saying something?
No, but I will ask this. That's season 3, right?
Yes, season 3.
Okay.
Monarch season 2 via Variety, and I love this casting. Prey star Amber Midthunder has joined season 2 in a heavily recurring role. She will appear as Isabel, described as an intelligent and powerful businesswoman.
Okay.
I actually love this because her and the other lady who was also in Shogun, she was the main focus of. She had the brother, and they went off and went into the what's that? When they go into the other core of the Earth, what's that called again?
The inner core.
Whatever it's called, I can't remember, Inner Earth, or what they call it for where Godzilla's from and all that kind of stuff. And where Kong, yeah. When they went in there and they came out and that kind of stuff in season 1 and where they came out at, I wonder if that business one that came out at the end of the season, I wonder if that's going to tie into her or she's part of a different business, that type of thing. But that all ties into Godzilla vs. Kong as well, with the whole Mechazilla company. So I wonder if how that all ties together. But I'm excited because those are 2 great actresses to see and they're young. That I love to see them come over to other things as well. But I will save the best for last. So this is one of my favorite things as a kid. I got my son into this. I still collect these things. Voltron live action movie. There is more things happening. It's going to be an Amazon MGM movie. Guess who's already cast in the film? Via The Hollywood Reporter, Henry Cavill will star in the movie. Now, this is interesting too because I wonder if they're going to go with the original ones where it was where Sven was the leader and Sven dies and then Keith takes over the Black Line after that happens. I wonder if that's the team they're going to go with, or if they're going to go with the Legendary Defender team, where Sven is the one. Or I'm sorry, not Sven. Shiro is the one with the Black Lion. He gets injured and Keith still again takes over, and they change the lines around. Now, depending on the age of the Paladins of Voltron, he could be Keith, right? I think if you look at all these people, Keith is the biggest of the 5 for him to play. But because I don't think it'd be Sven because Sven dies. So it's like, why would you make him Sven unless the whole movie's about that part of Voltron? And Shiro, he could be Shiro. He could be a mentor if they go with the Legendary Defender type ones. But I think if they're going to go older Paladins, I think he could be Keith. I also think he possibly can make a funny Hunk. Hunk's kind of like the comic relief type one, the kind of, that brotherly one type figure, I would say. He could make a Keith, a Hunk, but I think he's going to be a Keith if he's going to be one of the Paladins. But I could also see him be Prince Lothar. I don't think they'll make him King Alfor or Zarkon. Another big role he could play is Koran. He's the kind of like the assistant, person real high in the castle and with Voltron, and looking after Princess Allura and that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna say Koran, Prince Lothar, or Keith is the perfect role for Henry Cavill in this series, in this movie.
So I have never really watched Voltron. Don't
That's
be
fine.
upset. Yeah. I've never been a big fan of it. I don't know why. I've never really watched it or been into it. But I will say this. As you were telling me this, I was like imagining in my head, I said, I really hope they choose somebody to direct or work on this project that is not going to be like Kevin Smith or something like that.
Oh, if it's Kevin Smith, I will go insane.
Yeah, because like I was just thinking about like how he worked on He-Man, right? And I know a lot of people complained about that and
the Master Universe. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So I mean, hopefully they don't choose somebody like him to work on that. I feel like whoever ends up being kind of like the director of that, have they announced that yet? Have they said anything?
No. Yeah, I just hope it's not. I hope it's not Michael Bay, and I hope it's not Kevin Smith. Other than that, you know what would be funny? I think Taika would be a very good person for this project. Because if you think some of the things with all the stuff that he did with with Thor and some of the things they did in the comedic relief and some of those things, I think he could bring that into Voltron and just his imagination that Taika has. I actually wouldn't mind seeing Taika take this project.
Yeah, I feel like with Michael Bay, you're gonna get a lot of explosions and stuff. So it's like it kind of fits, but not really. Do you really need it? Probably not. So,
and I think too, if Michael Bay does this, he'll mess up Devastator like he did in which one was that when they went to the desert? the one Transformers movie where they had Devastator, which is the Constructicons, where the 5 construction vehicles form Devastator, which he completely botched Devastator. I don't want to see him botch the 5 lions form Voltron. It's like, you cannot mess this up.
Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't happen. You know, hopefully that's not a Kevin Smith project or a Michael Bay project. Or anything. So, because, you know, obviously we both expressed it that there are some concerns when you put Kevin Smith in charge of something. So
I'm also wondering too, who could they bring in as Princess Allura? Like, if they go, or you know what, we talked about her, Vanessa Kirby. If they go older, she could be Princess Allura. You know, that'd be one there. Then you gotta figure out with Pidge and Lance and Hunk to round them out, the team. But like I said, I also think that Henry Cavill could be a great Koran as well. He kind of already has the accent, anyways. You know, so
I wonder what
Henry Cavill. No, not Henry Cavill. I'm thinking somebody else for that. But I think he would still make a good Koran. He could probably pull the accent off in the way Koran talks.
I wonder what their budget's going to be on something like that. Hopefully it's not like $250 million or anything, you know. That is one thing that I feel like Hollywood needs to kind of rein in the budgets on projects and stuff, because, man, things get so expensive, and I feel like they put way too much money in some of these things sometimes. But I'm sure there's a lot of nostalgia with that project, right? Like, so there's going to be a lot of people of all generations that will be interested. And you said that was going to be a movie, right?
It's going to be a movie. I'm not sure if it's going to be directly on Prime, but it's Amazon MGM, so it could be a theatrical release. I have to go double check. Okay. I got so excited about the Henry Cavill piece, and I didn't really go. There wasn't much details anyway yet. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see how they round this cast out. But yeah, the director is going to be big to bring on, and then how they round the cast out, especially the Paladins of Voltron.
They should just promote that movie with like including the Cavalrine and just like show him just standing there. So it'd be awesome.
You know who would make it interesting if they go older? Who would make an interesting Lance?
Because
Lance kind of runs his mouth and kind of talks smack, and he kind of has that thing back and forth with Keith, the whole competition thing. It'd be funny if they brought Ryan Reynolds in to play Lance. If they make Cavill Keith, I would be cracking up laughing.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah.
I feel like Ryan Reynolds is going to be way too expensive. I feel like maybe for that. Who knows?
Probably.
I feel like that's like part of the problem with budgets now. This is like some of these actors are just so expensive. Like, you know, how much money did it cost to get RDJ to come back as Doom? I'm sure that was a lot of money.
He's got a couple $100 million, isn't he?
I'm pretty sure off of like the first Avengers movie, he made like $80 million or something like that. Because he gets like back end, I think, on a lot of those movies and stuff. So he doesn't only just get just his money up front.
Yeah, I think his front end was out there. So hold on, I'm looking up real quick before we sign off.
That's why I felt like part of the
he's in $100 million.
Yeah, I mean, like
front.
Yeah, so I feel like that's why, like, you know, by the time you made it to Avengers Endgame, it was like, hey, let's go ahead and kill him off. He's become too expensive at this point, you know. And that's why I thought that if they did bring him back, they would end up making him like, you know, CGI like a hologram and just let him talk, because it would probably be cheaper to have him record his lines than it would be to have him actually like come in and shoot and get dressed up and everything for stuff. Just because, like, I feel like RDJ at this point is so crucial with the MCU and is such a big name that he's just too expensive.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm sitting there thinking too about the whole Cavill thing. If he is Karan, they could also bring in what's his name, the actor that plays Timothy whatever you say his last name. They could bring him in as Keith or Lance as well.
Is that the guy from Dune?
Yeah, he's in Dune. He's there was a movie I saw him when he was younger. He's like a drug dealer like in the Northeast, which is a pretty cool movie. I didn't know he was acting that long, but I actually like that film. But yeah, he what else has he been in that I've seen? I think the main thing has been Dune, and then that other film that when he was younger. I know he was like Willy Wonka, but I haven't seen that one yet.
I like him. Somebody fan cast him not too long ago as Nightwing. I kind of like that idea, so it's not bad. So.
But that is all the news for today. For those of you that listen to this on the podcast, make sure to like, subscribe, give us feedback. Please like the Facebook page as well. We got to get over 100 likes or followers, so follow it, not like it, to string back to the page again. You can find us in the usual places. Comics Evolved. We are on Facebook page, Facebook groups for Marvel, DC, and Star Wars. We are on Kick, Trovo, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and then Instagram, Threads, and TikTok as Comic Evolved as well. So we should be back not this weekend, but possibly after episode 7, unless we do a 7 and 8 combination and then do one just for the finale of episode 9. We'll discuss it, but we will see you the week after, or the Sunday after this upcoming Sunday, possibly. We'll keep you all posted.
Yep. We'll see you next time.
Bye.